Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Friday, June 13th, Friday the 13th, 2025. And today I want to talk about the chefs using AI. We take a question about dealing with cover crops in the land where they will not die over winter. And it's Feedback Friday, so let's do it. All right, happy Friday to you all. I hope everyone is doing well. It was a hot couple of days in a row here, but going to cool off, and I agree with this decision by the weather to cool off. I think that was the right move. I've got some field tomatoes that need to go in the ground soon, and another late round of potatoes as well. Lettuce plantings, I'm pretty much caught up on, but those, have to do those every week. But this time of year, there is always something coming in, going out, all the things, like every day. So at least there's always something to do, which will pair nicely with the cooler weather. Anyway, it's Friday, which means Feedback Friday, where we explore what you all were saying about this week's topics. On Monday, we talked about sheep and why I think they can, and in some cases won't, make a good livestock for market gardeners. I didn't get into all the different types of sheep, so I liked this from @CutTwice3905, who wrote, quote, "Milk sheep, you have to get into making cheese and need a milking parlor. Good news, they take a few months break every year. Wool sheep, if you raise the right type of sheep and keep them in coats, you have a profitable market selling to hand spinners. Bad news, if the sheep get sick enough, their fleece is a loss for the year. Some sheep are dual use. May I recommend Cormo? They do come with a headache of paperwork, and replacing rams regularly is required to keep their paperwork clear. Excellent meat and wool," end quote. Indeed, I did not really dive into wool or milk sheep or, any of the dual breeds, but like they said, there are a few of those breeds that are what we consider dual breeds. We never raised wool sheep ourselves because they are certainly tough here with the heat and humidity. Not impossible, but tough in terms of fly strike and other diseases. Plus, you have to keep your pasture clean of certain plants that will get into the wool. Otherwise, it will make it unusable or at least difficult to cut. But as we've talked about several times already on the show, there is some garden use for wool, so maybe a symbiosis could be found there. Then on Tuesday, we talked about the importance of nature being included in conversations about health, and several good comments to that effect, like this one from @MattShanahan, who wrote, quote, "I very much appreciate and approve of your comments about being in the woods, or more generally in nature, as a necessary and important part of one's mental health. Thanks," end quote. Thank you. And indeed, the woods and nature are great for mental health, but I really, 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 really don't want it to get lost in my ranting that the environment around you is not just critical for mental health, it is critical for your physical health as well. Your heart, your lungs, all of it. The EPA is currently ravaging environmental protections, and those changes will have direct impacts, not just on people's mental health, but physical health as well. Yours, mine, our kids, our grandkids, everyone. The EPA are currently reducing limits on pollution from power plants, for instance, which includes mercury emissions, and according to the administration's own research, will result in more premature deaths and hospitalizations, mercury being linked to neurological disorders in children, plus lung and heart diseases in adults, etc. Environmentalism has this weird stigma in certain circles, but that stigma has to die, or we do. The environment is part of you, not just in everything you eat, but in every breath you take and every sip of water. It does not make you a weird tree-hugging hippie to care about the environment. It makes you a completely rational nerd. Full stop. On Wednesday, we had the great Betsy Lamb on to chat about aphids, and I love how much love Betsy got. It was her first podcast, and she absolutely killed it. @Mistral434 wrote, quote, "Thanks, Betsy. Quote unquote, first podcast, you were outstanding. Very helpful information," end quote. And I couldn't agree more. Betsy rules. I also liked this quote from @LaterDays4080, quote, "The 10,000 ladybugs I ordered and released into my garden for aphid control only to watch them fly away. We're thinking about aphids all wrong. I know that," end quote. There are a lot of issues with bringing in ladybugs and other beneficials as opposed to attracting them, but spending all that money to watch them fly away is probably the most wah-wah of them. awesome. Then on Thursday, we had not one, but two lively conversations in the comments. One about the terms people prefer for different types of gardeners/farmers, and the other about comfrey. On the terminology front, there were several like this from @WDavis12113, who wrote, quote, "Here in Northern California, the term grower is most often used to describe someone who grows cannabis," end quote. And indeed, this is definitely true in those areas, but honestly didn't even cross my mind because here in Kentucky, we do not have like legal cannabis production on any sort of scale, save for a little bit of medical marijuana. So that term is not generally used that way around here, basically at all. It's a bit colloquial, as all terms tend to be, or at least used to be. A couple other terms that came up are producer, gentleman farmer, or gentle lady farmer, presumably, urban farmer, gardening enthusiast, and kitchen gardener, among others. More out there than I even realized. On the comfrey side of the conversation, lots of love for comfrey, and certainly a few horror stories of getting non-sterile varieties. If you planted something like that, it would be similar to, say, dock or one of those other deep-rooted perennials, and getting rid of it would be extremely tough. You would have to tarp it for several months, if not a year, mulch the fire out of it, and dig up every single piece that came up. No easy way to get around it. But definitely do not let comfrey go to seed if you do not have the sterile variety. Anyway, great stuff as always. You all rock. We're going to take our first break, and when we come back, is there a kill any cover crop option that isn't tarps? BRB.
Drive the same roads every day. We both get there our own way.
Today's episode of Growers Daily is brought to you by Peaceful Heritage Nursery. If you're looking for hardy and resilient fruit trees, berry plants, or pawpaw trees, then check out Peaceful Heritage Nursery. Peaceful Heritage Nursery LLC is a mail-order nursery shipping premium quality fruit trees and berry plants across the USA. They specialize in resilient, non-GMO plant genetics for small growers. Their diverse selection includes berries, cold hardy figs, passion fruits, gumi, mulberry, and much more. They're famous for their diverse selection of premium quality grafted pawpaw trees. 5-star Google ratings and customer testimonials attest to their commitment to excellence in quality and service. Find them at peacefulheritage.com and join the mailing list. Once again, find them at peacefulheritage.com. Use the promo code NOTILL for 10% off your first order.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Precip. Precip is billed as the easiest way to keep track of rainfall, and that is true, but it is a lot more than that. Sure, you can open the app and immediately see accurate rainfall totals, but you can also save locations to see historical rainfall totals, wind speeds, and all sorts of other nerdy details. Their radar-based technology means you can ditch the rain gauge. I usually have to do that anyway because the kids find a way to smash it with a baseball bat. You can ditch the rain gauge and start tracking rain and other growing conditions all on your phone. Click the link in the show notes to find out more. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. Does this show bring you $2 worth of value every month? $5? You can show your support over there, and I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Pierre and Lachance at Yellowbird Creek Restoration Farm, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse, enjoying the show. The May 7th video on tarps," that one I think was titled Risks of Starting a Garden Too Fast, plus the ecology of plastic tarps, both good and bad, made me think about cover crop killing in the South. We are in Texas, and frost does not kill many things here, which is a good thing because we can grow all year with minimal protection. But for cover crops, it is a problem. I'm setting up my market garden to always have 1/3 under cover crop and out of production for soil health. That means killing cover crops in all types of weather and with different crops. My question is it wiser to have a specific protocol to kill each cover crop mix, a summer, a winter, and a fall method, or to try to have a general approach for all and to keep out maybe some mixes that may be troublesome for my area? I am still working on my mixes for the South. Do you do only winter cover crops? I plant in October for winter, that is terminated in January, February for planting in March, then in March for summer, terminated in the heat for planting in September, and sometimes with the rainy summer, I will sow things in August for termination in November to transplant under cover. Your help would be great if you think alternatives to tarps can be used, end quote. All right, great questions here. Thank you. So the main question, as it seems to me, is can you have one approach to kill all cover crops, or is it better to have a novel approach for each cover crop or cover crop mix? Well, generally speaking, things like a tarp laid on top for a few hot weeks will kill about anything. So in some ways, if you plan to use a tarp or even a clear piece of plastic like from the old high tunnel, then yes, you, especially there in Texas, could probably get away with a single option to kill basically every cover crop. Now, it sounds like you are also looking for alternatives to plastic tarps and presumably tillage, which eliminates your blanket options that will kill every type of cover crop. So in that case, you will indeed need a strategy tailored to the crop you are growing. And as you suggest, you will have to be very thoughtful about the mixes you put together. For example, simple legumes like peas or beans can generally be killed with a very low to the ground mowing. Then you can either let the residue dry and decompose on the surface or rake it off. But either way, with a light amount of soil prep, those beds are largely ready to roll. For something like rye, however, we have discussed relatively recently the milk stage, and that is indeed the best time to terminate it with a simple crimping, especially on a hot day in Texas. That should be enough to keep it down and to kill it off, so long as the crimp is thorough and carried out at the right time. The nice thing about tarping, I suppose, is that you don't have to have perfect weed control, because what the mulch doesn't kill, the tarp usually will if left on long enough. Without the tarp, you definitely have to be even more thoughtful about weed control before the cover crop goes into the soil. Like, make sure those beds are completely clear of weeds, whether that's a stale seed bedding or tarping or whatever. You just don't want any weeds to have to compete with after you crimp it or kill it. Something like sorghum Sudan grass as a summer cover crop is not going to be so kind and die so easily in Texas, not with a mowing or crimping at least. It grows back readily after mowing, and it will sprout out from the roots after crimping sometimes. So in the summer, stick to simpler, more tender cover crops like buckwheat and easy legumes like field peas, cowpeas, beans, that sort of stuff. In that case, it's a lot easier to terminate them. Of course, that also sacrifices a bit of the mulch, but as I often say, the mulch on cover crops in hot regions is not always that helpful as a weed suppressant anyway. It just breaks down too easily. It helps with moisture for sure, but for weeds, they generally just find their way through, or the mulch just breaks down too easily. It's hard to grow a thick enough cover crop for that. So again, your weed control beforehand, before the crop goes into the ground, is going to be critical. Sunflowers are a potential additional option here for mowing, though the root balls they leave afterward can be a little tough to deal with. So growing those later in the season, mowing them, and then having that space ready to plant in February or March could be an option, as the root balls will have at very least chilled out a bit. And by that, I mean decomposed slightly. And then they will be easier to deal with. It is definitely possible to do this cover cropping stuff without plastic tarps. You just have to be significantly more thoughtful about every step of the process, like I said. Otherwise, I hope that was helpful. And we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, no, chef, no. Be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe. But what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. All right, so I listen to this excellent podcast called Hard Fork every week from the New York Times, and it's largely about tech, like technology. Mostly lately it's been about AI. And shouts to that podcast, because this is a subject I could not care less about, but they make it fun and also keeps me abreast of what's happening in the tech world. So good work there. But they had a guy named Pete Wells on last week. And Pete Wells, for those who don't know, is the food critic for the New York Times. He had recently written a piece called This Year's Hot New Tool for Chefs. ChatGPT, and I was fascinated. First, Pete's story is largely about chefs, very famous ones in some cases like Grant Achatz of Next and Alinea in Chicago, using AI not just to take care of like simple administrative stuff, but for creative pursuits as well. In one example, Achatz is using ChatGPT to design dishes for his restaurant Next from several imaginary chefs, including at least one who had fictionally cooked under a few different famous chefs, including Escoffier, who had been dead for 90 years, plus Ferran Adria and sushi master Jiro Ono. Why Achatz couldn't just imagine these dishes for himself or with his team, I don't know, but that's the idea. Have AI come up with the menus based on these invented chefs. Quoting the article, quote, few have plunged headfirst into the pool in quite the way Mr. Achatz is doing with his menu for Next, but some of his peers are also dipping exploratory toes into the water, asking generative AI to suggest spices, come up with images showing how a redesigned space or new dish might look, or give them crash courses on the finer points of fermentation, end quote. Setting aside the fact that AI is incredibly energy and water intensive, as we've discussed recently, I'm fascinated by this idea of being a creative person using AI to do the creative part of the job. As you all know, I have somewhat of a background in cooking. When I was a late teen, early 20er, I went to be a chef and worked in professional kitchens, read books, studied Escoffier. I was obsessed. I love the unique combination of both creation and entertainment, coupled with arguably the greatest of human joys, feeding people. I studied cooking tirelessly, in between drinks at least. I spent hours in the library. My friend Andy and I would go to eat burritos before work and bust out the latest art culinaire or cookbook or whatever we'd bought and scheme on ideas for dishes. I lived for any time a chef would ask me my opinion on something. And I think for me to find out at that time that chefs were taking their ideas to ChatGPT instead of just like asking me any ideas of what I thought would have been just crushing. Instead, imagine a chef texting all of their employees like, hey, come up with a dish from someone who worked for Ferran Adria, Escoffier, and Jiro Ono. Go. All of these chefs, these young, underpaid chefs, getting a chance to like engage with that or be challenged like that would be incredible. Now, do I know that Achatz or some of these other chefs don't or haven't done something collaborative like that in the past? No. And towards the end of the piece, Achatz does bemoan what seems to be a lost culture of chefs standing around after work, brainstorming, but there has to be a way to engage the staff and young cooks. AI doesn't teach those cooks how to research or how to be creative, how to collaborate, how to invent, which should be part of the goal of being a head chef, is teaching those other chefs how to challenge yourself creatively. I'm sure there are young cooks in those kitchens, much like I would have been, who have ideas, who would love the challenge of coming up with a dish like that. I expect people to use AI to relieve them of some expensive labor. I don't agree with it, but that's the expectation. When they use it to do a creative part of their job, though, that shocks me. Because what's the point of doing that job if you're going to outsource the creativity part? Isn't the creative challenge the point of being a head chef, especially a chef like Grant? It's hard to compare it to farming, but for me, who grows vegetables because I love the taste of fresh produce, it would be the equivalent of me never eating my own food or somehow outsourcing that job to someone else. What would be the point? To me, generative AI is the anti-creative, not a tool, but it's a program that ultimately takes tools away. It relieves us of our duty to learn and experience and challenge ourselves and others. So instead of looking to AI for creativity in the parlance of our times, I say look to the young chefs out there in your kitchen and let them cook. Anyway, I grow increasingly disappointed in the things AI is replacing and the normalization, if not outright celebration of that loss. So shouts to all the chefs and artists who are like, yeah, no thanks. Otherwise, I think that's my grumpy old man rant for the week. So peace out, Friday, the 13th, no less. I hope everyone has a great weekend. I will be taking my porch apart, so that should be, if nothing else, something. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of June, you get a big shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to no new signups, actually. And well, this is the first time in a long time that I've not been able to conclude a story, which is both sad and kind of awesome. I mean, it's been a long time, but we will try again next week. Used up our weeklies midweek, so all good. You all are the best. We will see you on Monday. Have a great weekend. Watch some soccer. Go racing. That's a team. Not an idea, but you can go racing if you want. Anyway, yeah. Bye.